This season hasn't gone nearly as expected for the Los Angeles Lakers. They currently sit at 500 with a record of 21-21, good enough for only the 10th seed in the Western Conference. But if last season told us anything, it is not time to be counting them out just yet. A year ago, they found themselves in a very similar spot. They started with a nearly identical 19-21 record. Come the trade deadline, things had only gotten worse. They were 25-31. Hope was starting to get lost, and rightfully so. They had to make a last-ditch effort and ultimately decided to make 3 separate deals that pretty much flipped the entire roster on its head. Some of the deals ended up involving multiple teams, so to make things a little less confusing, here's everything combined. They sent Thomas Bryant, Patrick Beverley, Juan Toscano-Anderson, Russell Westbrook, Damian Jones, Kendrick Nunn, and their first-round pick in 2027. At first glance, it seems like a ton, and it definitely was from a quantity standpoint, but really the only thing that represented much value was that 2027 first, which they also managed to add a top 4 protection to. In return, they received Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, Mo Bamba, and Devin Reed. This level of roster change is rarely seen by a team during the offseason. They did this with only months left in the regular season. But somehow it worked. It worked better than they could have even imagined. After the deadline, the Lakers finished the season with a record of 18-8, a record only topped by the Milwaukee Bucks in that time. And they did that only having LeBron for half the games. The addition of D'Angelo Russell, and just as notable, the emergence of Austin Reeves, which happened in large part due to all the addition by subtraction at the deadline, saw instant results. They went from the 18th to the 14th ranked offense. The additions of guys like Jared Vanderbilt and Rui Hachimura led to defensive dominance to close the year, not just because of what they brought individually, but what they brought to the rotation and how they allowed Anthony Davis to thrive on that end. Prior to the deadline, they were a middle-of-the-pack defensive unit. Following, they were the second best in the entire league. They managed to finish as the 7th seed, advanced from the play-in tournament, took out the Grizzlies in round 1, the Warriors in round 2, before falling to the eventual champion Denver Nuggets. It was an historic turnaround that will be looked back on for years to come, but also one that put a whole new level of expectations on the team entering this season. It really looked like they would just be building upon that success. They managed to bring back pretty much the entire playoff core. They got new deals done for Rui, D'Lo, Reeves, Vanderbilt. The only major loss was Dennis Schroeder, but that didn't seem like an issue at all. They had brought in Gabe Vincent in free agency. They had selected Indiana guard Jalen Hood-Schifino with the 17th pick in the draft. Outside of the backcourt, they had signed Taurean Prince, Christian Wood. They took some flyers on guys like Cam Reddish and Jackson Hayes. You really couldn't ask for a much better offseason given the circumstances. But unfortunately, once again, the Lakers have found themselves starting the year far below expectations. Some of the struggles can be attributed to injury. Gabe Vincent went down just a few games into the year. Jared Vanderbilt missed the first chunk of the season. Rui's missed some games. But even when this team has been pretty much fully healthy, they haven't come close to being that team we saw at the end of last season. Defensively, they're middle of the pack. Offensively, they're bottom 8. Something needs to change, and quickly. So with that being the case, it's really only a matter of time before they try and replicate that success they found in the trade market a year ago. Pelinka deserves all the credit in the world for that success last season, but the job is much different this time around. They're not going to have the luxury of a weak, beat-up Western Conference. When they were able to climb to the 7th seed, they did that with only 43 wins. This year, that might not even be enough to make the play-in. Last season, they wanted and needed to gut the entire roster around LeBron and AD. This season, so much of this core is really strong. The goal now is likely what Lakers fans have been fantasizing about for years now. A blockbuster deal for a big name that can potentially be that true third option. And as we get closer and closer to the deadline, the odds of that happening are getting more and more realistic. Early on in the season, the name that was brought up constantly was Zach LaVine, especially after those reports came out of there being this mutual interest between him and the Bulls on moving on. We saw reports such as this one from The Athletic. All signs are pointing to these teams eventually finding common ground on a deal that works for both sides. But those reports have vanished. In fact, reports now suggest that the Bulls will likely have to add assets to any LaVine trade to escape his massive contract. That contract, in combination with his numbers being down across the board, already dealing with an injury so far and seeing the Bulls actually have more success without him, seems to have taken LaVine off the Lakers' list of trade targets. So now we're seeing a new name brought up, one that seems to be gaining more and more traction with the deadline only a couple weeks away: DeJounte Murray. Now this is a move that's interesting. This is a move that really might have the chance to change the landscape of the Western Conference. The same could not be said when it came to LaVine. In order for the Lakers to match his $40 million salary, they would have to give up multiple important pieces of this rotation. To reach DeJounte's 18, the Lakers have tons of options, some of which involve getting rid of little to really nothing from this current rotation. Based on all the reports we're hearing, in combination with the Vegas odds having Los Angeles as the heavy favorite to be Murray's next stop, a big move between the Lakers and Hawks seems to be imminent. But what would a trade actually look like? I'm very bullish about the addition of DeJounte to this group, but that's highly dependent on what the package looks like. Their top assets currently are clearly Austin Reaves and his contract that pays him less than $15 million a season over the next 3 years. Then their first round pick in 2029, which is actually the only first rounder they can move right now. They'll also have the ability to send pick swaps in 26, 28, and 2030. They've got guys like Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, and D'Angelo Russell with only 1 year left on his contract. They've also got a couple young guys like Max Christie, Maxwell Lewis, and their most recent first round pick Jalen Hood-Schifino. Whatever trade we see from the Lakers is going to involve some combination of this pool of assets. But here's where things get a little tougher. The Lakers reportedly do not want to let go of Austin Reaves and ideally Rui Hachimura. For that to happen, the package would be either D'Angelo Russell or Gabe Vincent for salary purposes, likely rookie Jalen Hood-Schifino, along with that 2029 first and at least one of those pick swaps. A package that would make their long-term future a little more concerning, but easily the best-case scenario in the short term. The inclusion of Austin Reaves would allow the Lakers to retain a lot of their draft capital, but how much would that trade really move the needle for them? Being able to retain him in the deal is where the upside of this trade actually gets interesting. Nothing's ever this simple, but here's some food for thought. Reaves' inclusion puts Murray alongside D'Angelo Russell in the backcourt, someone that's brought consistent, efficient offensive production over the last couple years during the regular season. Right now, since coming back into the starting lineup, he's on fire. But during the playoffs, throughout his entire career, he has consistently underperformed. Just last season, when they went to the Western Conference Finals, he posted the lowest defensive rating on the team while completely collapsing down the stretch offensively. He had a solid round 1, an okay round 2, but by the end of the Western Conference Finals, he was out of the starting lineup, a series in which he averaged only 6 points, shooting 32% from the field and 13% from 3. Then think about the other option, DeJounte Murray alongside Austin Reaves. Someone, while never notable, held up better defensively than Russell. Someone who seems to rise to the occasion as his numbers only improved deeper into the playoffs. During that same series, D'Lo collapsed. Reaves was averaging 21 and 5, shooting 55% from the field and 3. Not just that, he shot over 50% from the field and 3 in every single game of that series. Murray in his place likely changes nothing about that series. In place of D'Angelo Russell, it would have at least been a lot more interesting. It's hard to say what you can really expect from Murray with this group in the playoffs. He's had very little playoff experience, but what we do know is that last season, in the Hawks' first round series against Boston, he increased his production. He averaged 23 points, 7 assists, and 7 boards, shooting 38% from beyond the arc. At least an okay indicator that in a playoff setting, Murray would be a substantial upgrade to Russell offensively. But where this trade really gets interesting, where the upside really rests, is defensively. What's been at the root of so much of the constant change in the Lakers' backcourt this season. Right now, the value being pegged to Murray almost entirely centers around his offensive production, a stark contrast to not even 2 years ago when the Hawks gave up 3 first-round picks to bring him in. He was viewed as one of the league's elite perimeter defenders and already had an all-defensive team honor to his name. Flash forward to today, and yes, DeJounte Murray hasn't come close to the defensive production we all expected. But it's a little too quick to be suggesting things like DeJounte Murray was actually never the defender we made him out to be, especially without recognizing his situation. He came in with this wild expectation of making up for all of Trae Young's vast defensive inabilities, an expectation that was ridiculous. Just as much time was going to be spent hiding Trae Young with or without Murray. This team has also collectively gone the direction of this high-paced offense over anything, a play style rarely conducive to taking advantage or really even getting the value out of top-end defensive talent. This isn't to say that Murray's defense has been great, not at all. But it is to say it very well could be, especially in an environment where he's able to focus on his strengths rather than others' weakness. It's pretty easy to envision a world where everyone's kicking themselves after seeing what he could do with the likes of Anthony Davis and Jared Vanderbilt behind him, arguably the best defensive frontcourt in the league after last year's deadline. This is a move that solves so many of the Lakers' struggles while simultaneously adding a ceiling that's really hard to quantify. Those constant lineup changes would subside, offensive consistency would be added, defense would be added, versatility would be added. Now this isn't NBA 2K, nothing in the league is super simple or easy to predict. You can't just take the difference in production between DeJounte and D'Lo and slap that onto their current output. That's just not how things work. There's risk here. This could go very bad. They could give up a lot of their future, then continue to see Murray fall short of expectations defensively, struggle beyond the perimeter. It's tough to assume his 39% is a guarantee given the long track record of that being a major weakness of his. But right now, LeBron is 39 years old in the last year of his contract. This championship window in LA is fading quickly, and who knows when it's going to be back around again. We didn't expect the Lakers to have to make this kind of decision or risk at the deadline, but here we are, and right now, it feels like a risk well worth taking.